Welcome in to Tapestry. I'm telling you, it gets me every time when I think of all these threads that we're pulling on, going down that rabbit hole. And you go, and you go. Because if you've never looked in to the JFK murder mystery, this is a rabbit hole you're never going to forget. Welcome.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route.
Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard
My
Time.
brother need not be idealized or enlarged in death beyond what he was in life. To be remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it.
Well, there you go, folks. Whatever you thought you knew about Kennedy, whatever you think the people thought about Kennedy back in those days. I don't know. I don't know if your mind will be changed. That's certainly not what I'm trying to do with Tapestry. I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm trying to offer all of the facts that I can dig up, that I've been digging up through the years. I find it very strange that documentaries from the 70s, from the 80s, from the 90s were still showing facts that other people were digging up, researchers, not the official story, were digging up things that still have not been disputed. They're still holding true. These facts still, they're funny things, facts. They stay. Now within this swamp of just swirling with snakes and venomous creatures that thought that they could just be gods. There's so many. And that is, part and parcel with people who have money, power, and with that goes this arrogance of, for the greater good. We can make decisions, take this person out and just make all our problems go away. That's what Kennedy was caught in. I'm not here to say that he was 100% wonderful character. Everything about him was spit shined and wonderful. No, I don't think you can say that anything. Too many. There's not too many people living that you could say that about. That you dig down deep, you're going to find something. Kennedy kind of had a little bit of that right out front. We've talked about that. Again, it's none of my business who he slept with. That's between him and his wife. That's that right there. I tried to concentrate on the things I've heard over the decades of things he did that really felt like he was trying to help the country, to help stop certain things, like ease off on the Vietnam War, bring the boys home, don't start wars with other countries for frivolous reasons, things like this. I think what we found over the last 2 episodes of all of the things that were going on at the time, when you start digging and you take the old documentaries with these facts, now some of them go a little bit off this way, or they connect the dots with assumption or something along those lines, and maybe some of those gaps have been filled in over the years, and then some of them still have great big gaps. And then you have this swamp of misinformation, disinformation on purpose. You had panels of people sitting around in rooms. This is not a joke. In certain 3-letter agencies that were actually writing out stories they were going to add into the narrative just to throw people off. There's been movies made that they have paid for, books written, documentaries, you name it. that they have done to throw everybody off. So it's very hard to pick through all of this. So the best thing that we can do is just keep bringing out the facts, keep bringing out the stories, try to connect the dots as best as we can. But the unfortunate thing, I think, that's been since I've been digging around in this, and it's not just been recently, it's been over, the past several decades. Um, the thing seems to be, the more you dig, the more you find out another group wanted to kill Kennedy. And with the recent JFK files being released, and even more so over the past couple of days, I think there's been even more dumped. So there's so many. I've lost count. In those documents, which, I agree can also be faked and altered and redacted and whatever. But the thing is like I said on the first episode, people were looking for that one piece of paper, that smoking gun that was going to say this person did it, they ordered it here, and this is why it happened. That's not in there. What you have in there are all these documents of other, let's say, coups that have been done in other countries, things that we were involved in Africa, things that we were involved in Israel, things we were involved in France, things we were involved in just all over. And the controversy going on with the large oil, Kennedy was going to cut them. It would have affected them by about 30% of their cut. And they were pretty upset about that. Israel wanted its own nuclear program. He didn't want that. He wanted it, and he wanted it to be inspected. You need to keep an eye on that. We just went through the Bay of Pigs, where 90 miles off the coast, you got missiles pointed at you. We got to settle that. You got the Cold War going on. Him and Khrushchev talking, and over the past couple of days, I've been looking into a situation where it seems that the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is made up of, I want to say 5-6 generals. I could be off on that. Don't quote me. It's the top of my head. Taylor being one of them, Bombs Away LeMay being another. And we'll do an episode that really focuses on that. But just to catch us up here, they had gotten together and found out that Kennedy, or supposedly Kennedy, had a backdoor for information, to get information to Khrushchev. And what Khrushchev and Kennedy were supposedly working on was something dastardly called peace. Peace. They wanted it done. They wanted, an agreement between the two of them that there would be no escalation and a de-escalation of anything that had been going on. And the Joint Chief of Staffs found out that he had basically a messenger to carry messages, whatever, and they called it treason. So in their minds, if you want to believe that this scenario, they decided to kill him because of this and called it treason. So there's so many directions you can look in. The only definitive thing I believe that I can sit here and say tonight is that when you start looking back at the chaos of the times and how many people were conflicted back and forth, and who was angry at Kennedy, and who found out that they couldn't push Kennedy, so they wanted to get rid of him. He also had legitimate enemies. He had the unions. He had the organized crime, who they were going after organized crime. He and Bobby, that was one of their things. Bobby was relentless on that. And I'm not saying it was right or wrong. I'm just saying they were. But in the beginning, when he was running, he asked the union, he asked the mob, you're not getting with the mob. I mean, with the union, unless you're dealing with organized crime. Are you kidding me? In Chicago and for those times. So when they said, help us out, help us get elected, and they did, hey, remember us, we'll get you elected. And then, the patriarch, poison patriarch, Joe Sr., got involved there and said, no, you can't be associated with these people anymore, which is if you watch, there's a couple of movies out that have that part where he is very friendly with Frank Sinatra, big time. Frank helped get him, and the Rat Pack helped get him elected, and he's hanging out with Frank. You know, they're both very similar there. Broads and gambling and drinks. Um, he was supposed to meet Frank at Frank's house, and Frank Sinatra actually was having a helicopter pad built so Kennedy's helicopter could land at his beach house, and Joe says cut everything off. So through Peter Lawford, which was their go-between, Peter Lawford was married to a Kennedy, and he was a drunkard, and all he's quoted as saying, "All I want to do is get drunk, make movies and cheat on my wife." I mean, he was pretty much a louse. He shows up in all kinds of things going on with the Kennedys in Maryland and back and forth. It was just this group that hung out together. So he basically Kennedy sent word through Peter Lawford to tell Frank Sinatra, we won't be hanging out anymore. And Frank threw a great big old fit. And there was just an awful lot of people from Robert Kennedy's fight with Carlos Marcello out of New Orleans. That was just amazing. The stuff that happened between the two of them, the fighting back and forth. You guys can also think back and remember a lot of the congressional questioning that was going on when Bobby Kennedy, as Attorney General, is questioning Jimmy Hoffa, and so many other organized crime individuals from the mafia back then. So I don't think you could look in any direction and not find somebody that wanted to take Kennedy out, whether they wanted to make money on both sides of this Vietnam War, because they're not just making money on the bullets and the helicopters and the tanks and the trucks and the gas and the oil and everything else that starts, that is with the war. They're making money on something called heroin. And just like recently, when everybody's going over to Afghanistan and the soldiers are coming back and go, "What did you do there?" "Oh, we guarded poppy fields." Same thing was going on in Vietnam, and it was horrible. And I'm sure everybody's heard of Air America and, the CIA running drugs like crazy. Guns and drugs. It's always guns and drugs and people, When you look at all that, it's not hard to find a convincing direction to lay the full blame on this assassination. I think that's what's muddied the waters so much. On top of the chum they're throwing in the swamp that's already full of mud and tangles and weeds and horrible, nasty, venomous things. When you throw all that in, it makes it so difficult to see who made the call, who said it, who set it up. I think we have to back off of that one thing. I think to look at the Kennedy assassination, you have to assume there were multiple groups all at the same time. Tonight, I'm going to try to, through a couple of things showing you, we're going to watch a little bit more of the men who killed Kennedy. And now you're going to start seeing the waters get a little bit murkier. What's happening with the evidence? Well, when we left on Tapestry 2, we ended it with different gentlemen telling you their firsthand accounts of seeing the body when it first showed up at the hospital there in Texas, what condition it was in, how many people saw the body. Everybody, remember all the pictures that you saw all in one spot where everybody was going like this and saying the whole back of his head, and I hate to keep replaying that, but it's important to say that 42 people that they have on tape and, admitting that this is what they saw. The reason the Warren report didn't ask them is because it didn't fit their narrative. If those witnesses were interviewed, and they could not change what they saw to match the narrative. They were never called. They never looked at any evidence or brought in any witnesses that didn't go with the one-person shooter from behind from the sixth floor depository building. They didn't want anything from anything else, because anything else would be two shooters. You may not know that they actually had a patsy set up that if they did need a second shooter, they could pull from a group that they called Cowboys. Cowboys were a group in the CIA that were very much like Oswald. They would move them around. They'd have them involved in certain things. They'd keep them kind of low level, compartmentalized. Go over here and do this. Go over here and do this. Go meet this guy. Show him around town. Do this. Go over here. We want you to do this, this, and this. And this is what you're going to hear a lot about these cowboys. One of them is probably one of the most famous from this case, and that's James Files. That's somebody who's come out past 15 years, somewhere around in there. I think one of his first interviews was from prison, and he pretty much tells the story of how he was the guy behind the fence on the grassy knoll. You're going to hear another one tonight that comes out of France, where you had a group that were supposedly called out of their professional hitmen to come in and do this deed. You're hearing a lot of the French names, and they were very professional, and they were in, they were out, they were here for a while, they stayed at this hotel, people saw them, whatever. I can't say that didn't happen. I'm going to say it probably did. As far as hearing that there was people coming over from Cuba, two guys. These were the two guys that were pretty much focused on the Chicago hit that never took place, and I believe the Miami as well, that got thwarted, didn't happen. Hey, Aunt Edna, how you doing? Hello, everybody. So when you start to hear these things, instead of allowing it to confuse you and go, well, wait a minute, if two guys came over from France and they were there and there's some cold hard facts that really place them there, is this misinformation thrown in the mix to confuse and frustrate people, or did it really happen? Well, if you put that in there, did Kennedy still get shot? He sure did. So let's leave that thread in the picture. Let's see if that thread leads to something else or connects to something else or creates a picture on the side that's important. I think the thing that everybody does is say, well, I heard it was the Cubans that did it. The Cuban, hitman team, whatever. Those people that were called in, the contract killers. So it can't be the French. Well, hold on a minute. Why not? Instead of throwing it out, let's keep it in and let's see what the picture looks like. Because right now, I can tell you from my research over the past couple of weeks and everything that, and in the past, I'm counting 4 people behind the fence in the grassy knoll. And I could really use some help sorting that. But here's the thing. Who do you believe? What are they saying? Hey, Woo, how you doing, honey? What are they saying? How are they saying it? Is it, when did they start saying it? Did they start saying it after a book came out that had a little bit of info? Was it, you have to start doing this. If we just assume that everybody speaking is telling the truth until further notice, we might get a little bit bigger picture and stop just throwing out stuff because it doesn't fit what this other one said or this one said. Because the more I look at this in that vein and say all of these things could be happening at once, they could all be true, most of them, and still coincide with each other and still happen. Now, when you start thinking about how many shots did you hear? numerous witnesses. Some of them just coming out now. You're seeing documentation coming out, or you're seeing video files being released. We saw one last week that just got released in the new JFK files, and that was two people talking about LBJ being involved, and ordering the hit. And again, I don't disbelieve that, but at the same time, whoever LBJ had Mac Wallace or Clark, get involved, and Mac Wallace is there, and his thumbprint is on a box on the 6th floor, in the depository. He's the only fingerprint found up there. We can assume that Mac Wallace may have been there, or he moved a box. But we're getting files that come out that are collaborating with that and saying LBJ was involved. Everybody in Dallas thought LBJ was involved. There was multiple people. And as I said, what was going on the ground, well, you had posters that were printed up for Kennedy's visit to Dallas that accused him of treason. You had people so mad at him about the Bay of Pigs. Those people got slaughtered over there. And he could have hit the button, and he could have sent people in there to help him. And he said, no, we're not going to do this. And he was lied to by the CIA. He was lied to by Allen Dulles. And this is why he fired Allen Dulles. And the next two in line resigned. But Allen Dulles didn't quit the CIA. He just walked down the street, went into another office, and continued doing what he was doing. But his hands were all over this. And I hope that within the decade, I hope I live to see where they start. You want to change some names of things? How about Dulles Airport? How about we change that? I'd rather it be called the Jack Ruby Airport. At least he was honest about what he was doing. Even though he said he was doing it so Jackie Kennedy didn't have to go to court, we knew why he was doing it. He hated the Kennedys. But Jack Ruby's another story. So what I'm basically saying is tonight you're going to see a real scrambling of the eggs. Okay. But by God, I think we can make an omelet out of it. I really do. And I think if we take that approach where we're just not throwing out things left and right, there's one, I think we're going to get to it tonight, where you start hearing about a big part of the French connection, where this one poor guy, I don't know how he afforded to do the things he did. He's taking flights, he's trying to trace down this guy, all to get these names of who were the hitmen, and really by the time he was all done, what he got really got him no further than where he was, and it's just so sad to see, probably 25, 30 years of work. He did get some names, he did get a letter, he did get to talk to this guy, but what he really got was another name of another place of somebody that could have come to shoot Kennedy. I think Dealey Plaza was filled with hitmen, with names that people recognize. Most of these people that know, and worked with a few of these people, maybe they worked with them in one, situation or another, or maybe at a camp, or maybe, over in Vietnam, or, in Cuba, wherever they were going over there to train. There was a lot of people that recognized each other that day in the streets. It was like old home week. And I think they invited in a lot of people and had them show up just to muddy the waters. Hey, well, such and such was here that day. Oh, really? I heard that, such and such was here that day. And he we know that he's a hitman. He's coming out of there. I mean, this was set up, in just such an amazing way. And I don't think there was any one single mastermind. I think there was a few that talked to each other, said, yeah, that's okay, let them come. That'll just make it, a bigger party. That kind of stuff. Because it worked. It threw people off of the scent. So let's get back to the amount of bullets or the amount of shots that you hear. And you often hear things like, I was in combat. I know what a bullet sounds like when it's, when it's whizzing over your head or past your ear. These are true statements. And people who have shot before, you're going to hear things like that. We go shooting all the time. I know what it sounds like. I know what an echo sounds like. It wasn't an echo. So you get a lot of that minutia going on. Here's the thing. You're by a road. You've got buildings, concrete buildings all around. You have a little bit of field, and the field is kind of going up, hence the grassy knoll. You're going to get an echo and a report back off of all that concrete, but it's going to be different. It's going to be so different. So I kind of throw that out. I like to listen to the witnesses that were right there, especially the ones that were on the grass, on the grass by the side there, right by the road. It came from behind me. It came from in front of me. I heard this many. Let me throw a little scenario down for you. I've done quite a bit of shooting in my life. I don't know about you guys. I don't do it every day. I'm certainly not a pro. But I can tell you this. When I was in the military, it's no big deal to say, hey, look, I did parade duty, or I did funeral duty, or I did this, or I did that, because when they don't have anything to do with you, believe they'll train you fast and they'll tell you what uniform to wear, and you're going off in a group and you're going to do this today. It's just part of it. When you are there and you're a part of what you would call honor guard, or you're doing funeral duty, or you're doing what you would probably recognize as the 21 gun salute. Okay. Think about when you've heard that before. Think about when you've ever been to a reenactment, even though you're hearing blanks going off, or you're at any kind of a shooting competition. How many shots do you hear? Let's take a look. Let's play a little something, and you tell me how many shots you hear. And hopefully I can find it. How's everybody doing tonight? We're going to say hello after this. Just want to get this down. So you can be on the same mind, that I'm thinking as far as what could have happened here. Take a listen.
A central element to that is the casket team. And in a civilian sense, they are pallbearers that will carry the casket from the hearse or from the caisson to the gravesite. They will stand with the flag over the casket during the committal service. And then at the conclusion of that, they perform a very important part of actually folding the flag in the triangular fashion. And then it is presented to the next of kin as a symbol of gratitude and honor for the service rendered by their loved one. The folding of the flag in a triangular fashion is symbolic of a cockade, which was a tri-cornered hat that was worn by our soldiers in the Revolutionary War, and that's traditional folding it into the triangular fashion. There's a common myth out there that there's 13 folds and each one means something particular, but that is not the case. It's the tradition of folding it into the triangular fashion as the ultimate show of respect, and again, reflecting the tri-cornered hats of our Revolutionary Army. Yeah, the folding of the flag is done very reverently, very carefully. Each fold is done to ensure that there's no wrinkles. At the conclusion of the folding, the soldier will take it and hold it to his chest and straighten out any areas that might be wrinkled or just not right. They'll make certain that it's perfect. In their day, those soldiers honored the flag, and here at Arlington, that flag honors them. And it's done very reverently because of certainly what it means, and it's a token of gratitude from our nation to that family.
Okay, that's fun, but that wasn't the one I wanted to show you. Let me find it. I'm sorry, guys. I will find it. Come on. It skipped on me, and it's hard to go back. Are you laughing at me? I used to watch this one lady that every few minutes she would say, "Are you laughing at me?" And I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Laugh with me. All right, let's see if we can do this on here. Okay. Oh, they're gonna do taps. Taps is gonna make me cry. Okay. Let me see if I can do this one. How many shots do you hear? They're gonna shoot in a minute. Takes a minute. Everything has a reason. I can't believe they're wearing masks. That's horrible. Had to do this. It was always an honor. Half mask. Okay, here we go. Okay. Now, tell me. I can't do taps. Taps just it tears me up. Tell me, how many shots did you hear? You had 7 guns, 7 weapons, all shooting at the same time. You heard one. Even though it was 7 being shot one time. Think about that. So if you're on the grassy knoll, if you're by the street, what if there was a timing? Now, some people would tell you that that was the umbrella man. The umbrella open and closed. What's he doing with an umbrella? It's not raining. It's, it's not an extra sunny day, where he's trying to block himself from the sun. As the president's vehicle goes by, the umbrella opens and closes real quick. Was that a sign? Was that a signal that he's not dead yet? We need another shot. I think the timing to go was the first shot. The first shot from behind. I'm not even sure it came from the grassy knoll. It might have came from the Dell Tech building right behind it, because there was a rifle found up there. Somebody just dropped it and went. There's a couple of theories out there. There was 2 men on there. There was 1 man. It's hard to say. We'll get into it down the line. But I believe that was the first shot for timing. Because if the first shot was timing, and then everybody, whoever else is involved, all shot at the same time, it's not impossible. Because if they did, it would have sounded like 1 shot. The 3 shots, 4 shots people heard. I personally think there was about 5 or 6. We're going to see some of that tonight. So keep that in mind, that when you heard all those shots going at the same time, it sounded like 1, especially surrounded by concrete. You've got a little bit of rolling hills going up. You've got all of that to move that sound around, all those acoustics. But the people on the ground heard the directions those shots were coming from. So if you put that in your mix and you look at that tapestry that way, you allow those threads to go in. Okay, maybe there was more than 1 team. I would tell you that I think it was probably more like 4 or 5 different teams. And, 1 person by themselves could be 1 team, but there might have been others too. There was also people that were sent out there to keep people away from where they knew shooters were, even if the shooters didn't know that they were there, helping them to keep them back. And you'll hear that from certain ones too. So let's move ahead, and we'll start in again with this wonderful show, The Men Who Killed Kennedy. And as Lisa was saying last week, it was it's like 7 hours. Now, I'm breaking it up as we go along, but I think it's so important to go back to that time. What were they saying? Now, what's shown since then? Has anything been thrown out? Has anything been verified with the new documents? We actually have things that have been verified that was in this document that are still being held up as fact or backed up even further. And I think that's so interesting. So, what else do we have? Oh, we started with talking about LBJ being involved. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting is all the stuff that's coming out in the new JFK files that reflect LBJ's involvement, and some of the past things he was involved in too. There's a document in there that has several witnesses stating that they knew that LBJ had been in a group of KKK in Dallas, Texas, in early Dallas, Texas, before he became senator and everything else, and that he was connected with them, which is very odd when you start talking about the civil rights stuff he was doing. He was against all of that till JFK passed. There's other things with LBJ. Is, of course, we know that the trial that he was going to be involved in, this guy would have gone to jail if JFK hadn't been killed. I mean, literally, Bobby Baker was all involved. The courts were going. The minute the JFK wasn't pronounced dead, one of the attorneys for LBJ that was working with Bobby Baker got up, closed his briefcase, and announced to the judge. He said, going after the vice president is one thing, going after the president of the United States is another. And he walked out of the courtroom. And that was the end of the trial. Quite the character, indeed, Aunt Edna. So one of the things is we have a character you might be familiar with, General Flynn, who's still very much involved in everything that's going on now. See if I can find him. I've got one with Glenn Beck and one with General Flynn. And both of them are pretty good. Let's see which one this is. Oh, this is the one with Flynn. Let's see what he has to say.
So that old audio of Clifton Carter, the former head of the DNC and LBJ's bestie, right? And that Saul Estes guy, they're replaying that old audio all over social media. And you've got Clifton Carter there saying and claiming that LBJ was in on this, right? Mm-hmm. And then I'm hearing Roger Stone say that Nixon told him, hey, I wanted that seat too, but I didn't go to the lengths LBJ did and have him killed. Right. I mean, do you think that the vice president was possibly involved too back then?
Yeah, I think we're going to find out a lot. And I'll give you another name, Dan. Okay. Dulles, Dulles Airport, right? The Dulles was the CIA director under Kennedy. Mm-hmm. Kennedy fired him. Dulles then went, just like John Brennan and Obama have done, they went to a little safe house, a little house off-site in Washington, D.C., and they continued to run the CIA after he was fired. That's well known. So Dulles is another name along with LBJ. So, wow. Yeah, okay. I think more and more to come.
All right, some fireworks here.
There you go. And that's just recent. And to answer your question, Aunt Edna, yes, they have. And what it is it seems to be, and I'm no expert, but it seems to be that a lot of these documents that were once released earlier but redacted are now released unredacted. So that was really something to see. If 20 years ago when we saw them, if we were guessing correctly, because all the little spaces are now filled in. One of the big ones there that they were trying to keep redacted, even up to 96, there was a little note on the bottom of the paper. It said, do not release, what's in the bracket. Everything else can be declassified except for what's in the bracket. And in the bracket, 4 or 5 times on the document was Israel. So right away, when people got that document, you started to see podcasters coming out that night. I mean, it was like hours after this release. Israel did it. They were the ones behind it. And then you had other podcasters jumping in there because there was one document in there that was unredacted finally that spoke of, I believe it was an ambassador to Russia, talking about Underhill and some information that he had found out like weeks before the Kennedy assassination, that there were rumblings that this was going to happen. And because they they knew, and they weren't the only country. They weren't the only people that were sending information back. In fact, even Kennedy remarked on it and said, I'm going to get shot. He actually said, no matter what I do, somebody could just reach out of a building and shoot me with a rifle in the middle of the day or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing, but Kennedy said it. MLK said something along those lines too. If they're going to get me, they're going to get me. And so did Lincoln. I think a lot of these guys kind of see it coming and they're hearing rumbles. You could feel the feeling in the room. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, he even started recording, and he got some good trash on the Joint Chief of Staff by recording and then leaving the room and letting them talk. So good for him. He knew something was going on, but he was not the one that took the bubble off the limousine. They just blame the person who cannot speak up for themselves and say, hey, I didn't say that. He never requested for that bubble to be taken off. All of that was done. There was definitely Secret Service people involved. In fact, I'll make it easy and I'll say the only person, this is just my opinion and my theory at this point, I think the only Secret Service member that didn't know it was going to happen that day was the guy, I forget his name off the top of my head, Landry maybe, who wanted to jump on the car and was told to get off, and they left him behind, and he's thrown his arms up. We've all seen the tape. We'll see it probably tonight. And Clint Hill, who was not supposed to go and was requested by Jackie. That was Jackie's personal Secret Service guy, Clint Hill. And he was the one that jumped on the back of the limo. And she requested that he be there. And he wasn't even supposed to be there. So I don't think he would have ever been a part of that. I think it broke his heart. I think he was secretly loved Jackie. I mean, just had this admiration for her. Nothing. I didn't mean that like, sick and weird, just a genuine admiration for her. And yeah, I don't think he was involved, but again, who knows? So I can tell you this with full confidence. I think the only person that probably had a gun and didn't shoot at Kennedy that day, if they weren't a cop or whatever, was Oswald. I don't think he ever shot a gun that day. I think he knew it was coming. I think he definitely had the idea and the rumblings that there was something going on. He probably put it together, but he felt like he was part of the protected class. He was working with the CIA, and that's undisputed at this point. I mean, there's so much paperwork in these files that tell you about, everything Oswald was doing, the actual stuff. I think the whole thing in Mexico is BS. I think that was another cowboy that they had set up to say he was Oswald and all this other, again, smoke screens. So many smoke screens. You'd be shocked at how many they went through. So there you go. Let's start with this little gig again. I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and knock out, since we went ahead and already had General Flynn. Let me see if I can find this one. This was pretty good. Say what you want about Jeff Beck. A great guitar player. Say what you want about Glenn Beck, but man, he gives good whiteboard. So let's see what he's got going on here. This also helps tie up what General Flynn just said and the video we saw last week that was released in these new files of the conversation that Clark was having about LBJ calling for this murder. So let's see what good old Glenn has to say about it.
We've got the theory just there that LBJ was involved. What was his motive for involvement? And is there any proof whatsoever? Well, I saw something from Alex Jones. He featured a guest that claimed to have some proof, never before heard audio, of a conversation between close associates of LBJ. Listen to this.
Well, Saul, it's been a pretty touch and go situation. Linda and I have had quite a few unpleasant words here lately over the deal that he hired Mike Wallace to assassinate the president. It's been hectic in every way, but we've lived through it this far, and I guess we'll continue to do so. Lyndon should have never issued that order to Mike. But we've had our differences, and I'm a true blue to Lyndon, as I've always been, and tried to carry out every order that he's ever given me. But this is one I'll probably never be able to forget.
We wanted to see the actual tape to verify that you had tapes from that time, etc. And you pulled them out, and they're in a little baggie. Do you happen to have that?
I do.
Pull them out in a little baggie. You terrify me with this.
They're very old.
Yeah. So he comes to the studio, and you've only been presenting the digital form.
Right.
And you came to the studio with this little. Please take them out of the little baggie and let us help you preserve them, because this is game changing. And I want to play it directly from the cassette, so everybody knows what you heard before is it. You want to play?
We will. All right. So we've got it rewound, and I hope it does not fall apart. But here we go.
Lyndon and I have had quite a few unpleasant words here lately over the deal with that he hired Mike Wallace to assassinate the president. It's been hectic in every way, but we've lived through this far. I guess we'll continue to do so.
Okay, so we've heard the rest of it.
There you go. A little bit more. This was a big file, but again, anybody could come up and say, hey, they knew they were being recorded. They said some things. There's another one of LBJ talking, and he's talking to Hoover. And this is supposedly, keeping in mind, they were neighbors. They were good friends. They were definitely in on, setting people up and blackmailing people and everything else. Between him and Hoover, they were just that kind of buddies. He talks to Hoover, and Hoover is explaining to him, and we'll hear it throughout, in one of these shows. But he's talking to Hoover, and LBJ mentions, he said, was anybody shooting at me? And he says it in kind of a way that, like they had set it up ahead of time. And Hoover's like, no, it's one guy. We got the rifle. And he starts going off, and he starts explaining the casings and this kind of stuff. And this is one of the calls where Hoover is telling LBJ, you've got your guy. And LBJ is calling off. And at first he starts out, there's a conspiracy. They're going to kill us all. And then really quick, he switches gears and starts in this, like, were they after me too? All the Russians are going to get us. And they played that all weekend until about Monday, when you start getting these calls back from Hoover being recorded saying, you have your man. We can call off the investigation. This is the guy. And that's when LBJ starts rolling that back. So again, we can use both of these files as, were they really telling the truth? Did they know they were being recorded? Because I don't buy that LBJ saying, were they shooting at me, for 1 second, but it's on a tape. So what I'm saying is evidence, but it's not going to stand alone. You're going to have to put it with your theory, your research, what you think and how you think it fits. Nobody can really tell you that, because I actually heard James DiEugenio talking to Mark Robert, who we watched last week. He's just a funny guy, great researcher. And they were talking about it, and James said, well, we have a file where LBJ is saying, are they shooting at me? And Mark says, yeah, but he knew he was being recorded. Again, that's true, but it doesn't stand alone. Well, here's a recording of people talking. Here's a recording of people talking. One might be, you know what I'm saying? It's just like everything in this case, it could go either way. So again, you have to use your own discernment on it, right? Just like any paranormal case, right? Or true crime case, mystery. Where are we going next? Okay. Let's get rid of that one. And Jeff Beck really does have a really good whiteboard thing on that. It goes on for a little bit. It's worth the watch if you want to see it. But he's just explaining how everybody was connected. Let's do this one. So last week we left off with the men who killed Kennedy, and they were talking about the evidence of the autopsy evidence, the pictures, and all about the headshot, and this was the big deal. Because the fact that the people who came in and saw the body first at Parkland and the people who ran in, who were on duty, all saw the fact that this is a huge hole in this man's head. When the body gets to the next place, when they take the body out and they fly the into Bethesda, okay, when it arrives there, there's no brain there. The brain is gone. So all these rumors that you're hearing is the brain went missing and all this, yes. And the brain that was offered was one that had been in formaldehyde for a while. So there's that right there. Cover up, coup. You really don't need to go much further. And this is where we left it last week when we were talking about the pictures that were taken of the autopsy. The photographer who took them, when he was shown them later on, said, I never took these. I used different film. Absolutely positive. There was no mistake whatsoever. That's a coup. That is a cover up. The gentleman that told you last week, they had the pictures for the Warren report. They chose not to use them. And then when the pictures came up in 76, 77, when they were doing the House, another committee to look at the evidence again, they wouldn't look at the pictures. They wouldn't let the doctors look at the pictures. This is a government cover-up, plain and simple, full stop right there. You don't need all the other stuff. The fact that they keep bringing in everything else, you could get it right on that, but there's so much else. There's so much else. So that right there, full stop. They covered this up. I believe there was 2 coffins. I believe there was a switch. And I also believe some other crazy stuff, but we'll get to that. I know it sounds like nutty professor stuff, but I'm telling you, this case is reeked with it. And here we go. This is Grodin. He's still going today on this case.
What they did with it was even less excusable. They had the photographs, they had the questions that were brought to them about the photographs, and they did not allow the Dallas doctors, the most important witnesses in this particular area of the evidence, to even view them. And the reason seems quite clear. If they have the best eyewitnesses looking at the photographs saying that's not the condition of the president's head, then you not only have a conspiracy to kill the president, but absolute proof of the conspiracy to cover it up after the fact, because the only people who had the photographs were the government. If somebody faked those photographs, it was someone within the government, someone who had access to those photographs.
100%. I just wanted to say this. I wanted to say hi to everybody in the chat. I forgot to say hello, hello, hello. Aunt Edna, welcome in. Welcome in, Echo. I saw Vixen. I see Chris over here in my Rumble. Who's over here in my Rumble? Shut down on me. Let's get that back up. Hello, you little Rumblers in there. Good to see you. Good to see you. Please hit the like. Thank you for being here. And if you're not in the chat, you might want to jump in there. I see RP. I see Midwest. Hey, Gerald, how you doing? Chris is here. And let me go over here. Scott, how you doing, hon? Good to see you. Has anybody seen Henry tonight? If you do, and I miss him, please tell him I said hello, because I'm going to be watching this, and I might miss some stuff. If I've missed you tonight, please forgive me. Maybe we'll catch you along the way. All right, here we go. Do you believe that, Aunt Edna? Yeah, I mean, it's something else. But I think it's important. I think it's important that we try to sort this out for history as best we can.
But there are further disturbing indications of manipulation of the medical evidence in the hours prior to the autopsy at Bethesda. Dallas doctor Robert McClelland.
I would estimate that about 20% to 25% of the entire brain was missing.
My job in working with autopsies was to remove the brain. What struck me was when we removed the sheet, I looked down, I said, my God, he didn't have any brains left, literally. I was just astounded by it. I think everybody else was too, because there was just a gasp throughout the room. There was no brain to be removed at all.
At any normal autopsy involving such gunshot wounds, the brain would have been sectioned and the bullet tracks traced and all bullet fragments examined. This was not done. A vehement critic of the government's handling of the medical evidence is also one of the world's leading forensic pathologists, Dr. Cyril Wecht.
If the brain was not sectioned, then there could be no visualization of its interior. It's as if it never existed. I am very, very suspicious, and I do think that it could have been the height of a sinister conspiratorial activity in the post-assassination cover-up in this case to make sure that the brain was not examined in order to be able to disprove, or at least to be able to withhold the attempts by other people, me and other critics, to prove that there was a second gunman firing from the right side. Because again, you see, that gets to the question of whether or not there was a conspiracy.
Another long-standing critic of the official version of events has pursued the truth through the Freedom of Information Act, acquiring valuable documents which he believes prove a cover-up at the highest level. Former Senate investigator Harold Weisberg.
Lee Harvey Oswald was killed by Jack Ruby on Sunday, the 24th of November. Nicholas Katzenbach was the acting attorney general and the deputy attorney general, and he knew immediately that Oswald wasn't going to be tried. They didn't have to put this evidence into court.
Listen to that.
So he takes a lawyer's yellow Lego pad, he writes out in longhand a memorandum to Bill Moyers, that was the channel to Lyndon Johnson. And in essence, he says, we got to convince the world that Oswald was a lone assassin and that the evidence was such that he would have been convicted if he'd gone to trial. This is before they collected any evidence. This was Monday morning, Monday after the assassination.
The Dallas police were still collecting evidence and had to be stopped. After Oswald's death, the FBI swiftly requisitioned all the physical evidence, much to the chagrin of Police Chief Jesse Curry.
I had a request, and I have it here, where Mr. Wade requested, said I request that you turn all of the evidence obtained in the investigation of Lee Oswald's assassination of the president over to the FBI for mailing to Washington.
Look at how they're holding
We're turning
it.
all of our physical evidence over to the FBI.
This was on the direct orders of the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover.
Here you have the greatest police agency in the world. They're supposed to keep the president alive. He's killed in broad daylight on the streets of a modern American city. How can Hoover possibly admit that he couldn't know about this and he couldn't prevent it? There was only one way, by having a nut who was all alone do it. There was nobody to squeal on. So, from the beginning, J. Edgar Hoover had an instant vision. Oswald was a lone nut assassin, and that's all that anybody ever considered, anybody in official position. You can say, let me try and understand what the government did, how it worked this way. And you can understand that maybe for a couple of days, they didn't want the truth to come out because they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't want to frighten people. They wanted to preserve domestic tranquility. Was it going to be an attack on Lyndon Johnson or the Secretary of State? Was it going to be an invasion from abroad? Was this the beginning of a revolution? Those kind of things have to enter the thoughts of the people in authority in Washington. After a couple of days, when everybody knew this wasn't happening, then there's no excuse for the lying.
The lie was that Oswald, a poor shot, fired his 3 bullets from the 6th floor window of the book depository in under 7 seconds. No expert marksman has ever achieved this feat. The Warren Commission, basing its findings on the earlier FBI report, at first said 2 bullets had hit Kennedy, 1 in the back, 1 in the head, and 1 bullet had hit Governor Connolly. Their conclusions were thrown into disarray by eyewitness James Tague.
Standing right at the east end of the triple underpass on the sidewalk between Main and Commerce. And when the first shot, which I thought was a firecracker, happened, and I heard 2 more, I ducked behind the triple underpass and actually did not see too much of what was going on until I looked out and the presidential limousine was going right by me under the underpass. At that time, Deputy Sheriff Buddy Walters said, "You have blood on your cheek." I reached up, and there was a couple drops of blood. And at that time, I remembered something had stung me during the shooting. He says, "Where were you standing?" We walked back, and from about 40 feet away, we noticed a mark on the curb, a very fresh mark.
The FBI sends some agents from Dallas, and they file a report that says there's no mark there. It must have been eradicated by the brushes using to sweep the streets. You know, there'd be no streets left in the world if that happened, but it was accepted. But this wasn't even in the street. It was on the curbstone. So, of course, they couldn't get away with that. So the commission got after the FBI, and they sent Lyndall Schoenfeld, a photographic expert, down. And accompanied by Robert Gemberling, who was the case agent in Dallas on the assassination, they got the pictures, they spoke to the photographers, they went exactly to where a point was, and there it was. Except that it was a little bit different. Instead of a hole, you can see the difference in color, you can see the difference in texture, and I know because I've examined it at the archives. It's darker and smoother. Instead of a bullet hole or a nick made by a bullet, you've got it all smoothed over in darker color. So they dig it up, they take it back to Washington.
Look what they do.
They go through this incredible charade of making scraping samples off and making a spectrographic analysis of what they know is not the evidence. They don't give a damn about the fact that underneath it is something that could have been a consequence of hadn't been covered over. They have no questions about why would somebody want to hide this when the president is killed. And then they destroyed the spectrographic plate when I asked for it. At least they say they did. And the court said to produce it. They said it doesn't exist. And the explanation, not under oath, understand, just a possible explanation. It must have done it to save space. A 32nd of an inch in the world's largest collection of files, which the FBI has, they're saving space with 1/32 of an inch.
Can you
get away
imagine?
with this in court.
They did not want a missed shot. It would not fit. And my testimony would prove that there was one missed shot that went over the limousine and hit the curb beside where I was standing. It did change the outcome of the Warren report.
So late in the day, the commission were left with only 2 bullets to cause all the wounds to both Kennedy and Connolly, and one of those bullets had to have injured both men. To explain this, Arlen Specter, a counselor to the commission, created the single bullet theory.
Okay, now Arlen Specter is the father of the magic bullet theory, but I want to answer the questions here. I've got some over on Rumble I wasn't seeing because for some reason Rumble's, not all of them, it seems like only some of them are not coming over into the StreamYard, so I'm not seeing it in my chat there. So I'm back looking over in Rumble so I can try to catch you guys what you're saying. And Gerald was talking about the 3, what's called 3 hobos, that Woody Harrelson's dad was there. What's his name? I forget it off the top of my head now. He's got it written here. I think it was Hank or something. I can't remember. Woody Harrelson's dad was behind the fence in Grassy Knolls dressed as a hobo, known hitman. He was a known hitman. He was one of those cowboys. He was in there with Chauncey Holt, and Chauncey Holt has got a fantastic interview on, and he was one of those cowboys, but he has inside knowledge of the outskirts of getting ready for the hit. He was actually working in a building that made the badges, made the false IDs for the Secret Service. There were so many guys there that had these Secret Service badges. They were all over the Grassy Knoll. I think that's also important. Why the Meatloaf story is important, because Meatloaf, yes, the singer Meatloaf was there. I think he was like 16 years old at the time. And when you try to tell some of these researchers this, they're all like, well, it doesn't matter. You know, Bill Paxton was there on his dad's shoulders too. What's the big deal? Okay, Bill Paxton being on his shoulders is a coincidence. It's fun to know that he was there in the crowd. Meatloaf was in a car with 2 other friends of his from high school. Here, the president's coming. They go out to Love Field. They drive out there. And then, you know, they're still hanging around and they hear that the president's been shot. All of a sudden, there's this big hubbub. Well, they're not rushing to get to the car to go see what's going on as much as everybody else is because they're just teenagers. The person that was driving the car, I forget what friend he said that was driving, but a man in a suit came up, said he needed to commandeer the car, and the kids got smart with him, and he whips out a Secret Service identification, and says, I'm taking this car. He brings the kids with him, tries to give him $100 bill. The kids turned it down because at the time, even when if you felt, you know, you were for Kennedy or not, there was a kind of hush, to quote the song, that just went through everybody, you know. Either you were so happy, like, oh man, somebody got him, you know, like General Bombs Away LeMay was with the cigar, smoking it in the OR where they were doing the autopsy, and just, you know, like a celebratory cigar. He hated Kennedy. There was obvious on that end, but there was also obvious on the other, this kind of hush that went through the population where everybody understood, man, this is important, you know. And even young 16-year-old teenagers were turning down, not today, man. You know, one of those. There was a reverence about it in some ways. And I think that's important. The Meatloaf story is important. He told it on Huckabee's show and several other shows. But it's important to know that there was also false Secret Service people that were at the airport. They just had them everywhere. And I don't know how many badges and IDs that Chauncey Holt and these other people for the CIA were making up, but it seemed to be quite a few, dozens of them. And they were popping up all over the grassy knoll and behind the fence where the railroad yard was. Here's the deal. There was nobody assigned there. These were all set up by outside people that were in on this. There was that many. And you realize there was that many, thinking there was a couple of hitmen in different places, really isn't that hard a stretch to go for. So I wanted to talk about that. And I'm sorry that these chat comments aren't coming up on here. So if I miss them, jump over into YouTube or get my attention, you know, do it a couple of times. I'm not ignoring you, I promise. I'm just trying to watch 3 different chats at once so I don't miss you guys. But yeah, so here we go. This is the magic bullet. Unbelievable as it is how anybody was buying this Warren report back then. And here's the thing, most people weren't. They knew what was going on. And I also get a lot of pushback on something you're going to hear in here about Gerald Ford. He actually did this. And if they don't tell you here, I'll tell you after.
Known to critics as the magic bullet.
The infamous magic bullet. We have that bullet exiting from President Kennedy's neck, moving forward and leftward and downward. It now stops in midair. It turns to the right. It comes back a full 18 inches, stops again, and then slams into John Connolly's back. It continues downward, and it goes through his wrist, and somehow they get that right wrist over to the left thigh. If you look at the Zapruder film, you'll see in the individual frames that John Connolly's right wrist is not near John Connolly's left thigh. The significance of this, the importance, cannot be exaggerated. It is impossible to overstate it. Why? Because the single bullet theory is the sine qua non of the Warren Commission report. It's not a matter of how much weight and credibility do you give to it. It's a matter of whether or not you have a single bullet theory that permits you to conclude that there was only one person firing, whether it was Oswald or anybody else in the world. If you don't have a single bullet theory, then you cannot have a sole assassin. And if you move to that point, then you're into conspiracy by definition. And that's why it had to stop with Oswald as a sole assassin. And that's why they came up with the single bullet theory. There's no question in my mind that that 26-volume set should be taken from the shelves of all the libraries where they now rest in the United States from nonfiction and placed in the fiction shelves along with Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, and Gulliver's Travels. That's where they belong.
Straight out of the realms of cheap fiction, Chicago's tough West Side and the birthplace of a notorious son. Jack Ruby, small-time hoodlum and runner for Al Capone in the 30s, based his life around gambling, narcotics, and prostitution. His Carousel Club in Dallas was one in a long line of unsuccessful nightclubs, where Ruby often played host to members of the Dallas police force and the criminal underworld. A fitness freak, Ruby swam in this pool at his apartment every morning, but internally, his life was in chaos. In the months preceding the assassination, his phone calls from the Carousel Club and this apartment to well-connected mob figures increased 10 and 20-fold, a pattern which had begun with the announcement in late April of President Kennedy's intended visit to Dallas. A distinguished journalist who knew Ruby well was Seth Cantor.
In the weeks immediately before the assassination of the president, unaccountably, Ruby had visits from some members of the underworld who he had not even seen in a period of something like 20 years. In May of 1963, Ruby traveled to New Orleans to negotiate for one or more strippers for his club and dealt with a man named Harold Tenenbaum there. But New Orleans was and has continued to be controlled by a very powerful mafia figure named Carlos Marcello.
Marcello, a leading target of the Kennedy brothers' war on crime, had sworn vengeance against them. His interests in Bourbon Street were first visited by Ruby in June 1963, ostensibly to recruit fresh flesh for his Carousel Club. This dancer at the show bar, known as Jada, was signed up by Ruby. But was she the cover for more serious underworld business?
Ruby's connections with nightclub people in New Orleans meant that one way or another he was dealing with Marcello associates. He had telephone contacts and personal contacts with various well-known gunmen and thugs who regularly serviced the underworld in Chicago, Miami, Las Vegas, Houston, and in New Orleans.
These underworld links were never investigated by the Warren Commission, who found no evidence of a conspiracy. They also found no connection between Ruby and Oswald. Interviewed for the first time, former nightclub singer Beverly Oliver has finally broken her silence of 25 years.
I purposely have waited this long. I've always felt very threatened. You know, a lot of folks that gave testimony are no longer around to give testimony any longer. I didn't want to become a statistic. I didn't want to be one of those people that shot myself in the back of the head with a shotgun. One night in particular, I recall about 2 weeks prior to the assassination, being in the club, parking lot separated his club, the Carousel, and the club that I worked at, the Colony Club. So in between shows, the showgirls from the Colony Club would go over to Jack's club and watch their show, and in their show breaks, they would come and watch our show. So I had trotted over there that night and was watching the show. And there was a girl that danced there by the name of Jada. And she was sitting at the table with Jack Ruby and another man. And I went and sat down with them to have a drink. As I sat down at the table, Ruby introduced me to the man sitting there at the table with he and Jada. And he said, "Beverly, this is my friend, Lee." And after Jack Ruby went into the police station and killed Lee Harvey Oswald, it was then that I realized this was the man that I had met in the club 2 weeks prior to the assassination of Kennedy. Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby were linked together, and I don't know how, and probably I never will. But I know in my heart that man, Lee Harvey Oswald, or the person that was shot in the basement of the police station, was the man that was in the club 2 weeks prior to the assassination. As a matter of fact, the next day, Jada gave an interview to the newspaper, and she said the same thing that I'm saying to you now, that she met Oswald 2 weeks prior to the assassination of Kennedy. However, unfortunate it is, Jada is dead, or so they tell me.
Jack Ruby's close links with the Dallas police gave him easy access to their headquarters. On the assassination weekend, he was seen there several times.
You bet he was. So I'm going to stop it just to tell you, there is no dispute now that Oswald knew Ruby. Ruby knew Oswald. They are popping up in all of these places. If you recall, if you ever saw the movie JFK, JFK is based on 2 books. One of them is Crossfire, and I forget the other gentleman's book. But it because of Garrison being the AG in New Orleans, where Marcello is the head crime guy. This is why you start pulling up all that Clay Shaw and Ferry and that group, and what's her name? Alice Ferry Baker or something. But anyway, they're all working on all these different things against Cuba. So they're either working with the rebels for Cuba. They've got this one building, and it's 55 something street. I can't remember. You'll see it. And on this level, like the first floor is one thing. The next, there's an office over here, and they're dealing with something else for all of this underhanded, clandestine kind of stuff against Cuba or some other thing that the CIA or FBI was up into. It was crazy. So Oswald's down there for a couple weeks handing out pamphlets for, free Cuba and, all this different stuff, and saying he's a Marxist and, making himself known. He even starts a fist fight at one point to show that, he was there and he's a Marxist. And I'm not even sure, being that Lee Harvey Oswald was like this really quiet kind of, I wouldn't say mousy, but he was very quiet. When you start talking to some of these people that knew him in the clandestine world, he just went and did. He went and did what he was told to do. Didn't ask a lot of questions, wasn't a big talker. There's plenty of scenarios where he's in cars with people, like showing people around Dallas and stuff like that. He's not really saying much. They're not talking about what's coming up. He was just this young kid who was involved in a lot of stuff, probably excited. I have a theory that what happened to him in the military, especially back then, there are certain things in the military that just kind of happen. So what I mentioned in the beginning was why I went to go do a lot of this duty, like the honor guard and things like that. It was really good at drill and ceremony. And, you get picked. All of this goes down on paperwork. So if you have a group of people in one base that they really don't have any assignments, they really don't have anything to do, this group is going to get called. It's the closest group. Get them in the right uniform, have them go do this. That also happens on an individual basis. Now, one of the things that these files have shown and released, a little bit more information on Lee Harvey Oswald's military records. It also coincides with a gentleman that came out about 3 or 4 years ago, really digging deep into his version of looking into this. And his vantage point was he was working in a military building that held military records. And that was it, just files in file, little folders, little file folders just stuck. And he said that he worked a night shift and they got really bored, and there was only like 3 channels on the TV or something back then. So, just to entertain themselves, they used to go through the files and read these files on how certain individuals got medals and what they did to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor or whatever it may be. This one day he's down there and there's this one file he thought was empty. And can you imagine the luck on this? And it's all these officers, right? He goes to pull the file because he's going to throw it out. He thinks it's an empty file, and he pulls it and he opens it up. There's 3 or 4 pieces of paper in there. And on the file, it says Lee Harvey Oswald. So he's scratching his head trying to figure out, well, this is a non-com. This is a private. What's he doing here in the officers? And then he starts reading the file and he starts piecing it together. And on his DD-214, and if you haven't been in the military, that's your paper that you get and you take to go get all your benefits and stuff. It tells you how you got out of the military and what your standing was and all the medals you got and where you were stationed, all your stuff. On his DD-214, there's also down there where it has your medals, is it has what you qualified as far as how well you shoot. Now, then, and it still is, I believe, the way it's ranked is you are a marksman. Okay, you qualify as a marksman, qualify as a sharpshooter, And then the best one is you qualify as an expert. Well, there's one before that, and that did not qualify. On that form, on the DD 214 for Lee Harvey Oswald, it said, there's an acronym for it. No, it's like NOQ or something along those lines. And what that means is did not qualify. So Lee Harvey Oswald didn't even qualify as a marksman when he was in the Marines. So what that tells me is, from my vantage point, linking into that, being a female at the time I was in, they used to give us tests to see, well, they won't be able to do it. So we're just going to tell them we're going to do this. They won't be able to do it. And then boom, we'll move them on to something else. Let's prove to these females they can do it. Well, what kept happening is we kept being able to do it. And then they would tell us, okay, well, you qualified for airborne school. Okay, we're not going to put females in airborne school yet. This was back in the day. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a paper that says insufficient funds. We can't afford to send you here yet. So we're going to send you over here and you're going to do this because we have an opening here for you to do. So somebody that is not qualified to shoot is going to get removed from whatever MOS that they were in. They're going to find them something else to do. They found something else for Lee Harvey Oswald to do. That's my theory. You might hear something about that later on and in your research or whatever, but take that in consideration that this guy saw that. And not only was it stated there that he didn't qualify and they were trying to hide it, but they took a private's folder and hid it amongst the generals and the officers where nobody would ever look. Incredible, isn't it? All this little stuff. So let's continue on. So, yeah, I can guarantee you that Ruby knew Oswald and vice versa. They kept bumping into each other. This little group, it's all like the same people just moving around. It's crazy. Still going on today, guarantee it.
Even correcting information about Oswald given out at a press conference. Was he stalking his prey? Billy Grammer was a police communications officer on duty the night before Ruby killed Oswald. Around 9 p.m., he received an urgent message from a caller who refused to identify himself.
I thought I recognized the voice, but at the same time, I could not put a face or a name with the voice. And as we talked, he began telling me that we needed to change the plans on moving Oswald from the basement, that he knew of the plans to make the move, and if we did not make a change, the statement he made precisely was, "We are going to kill him."
Billy Grammer reported the call, finished his shift, and went home to bed. He was asleep when Ruby, seen here on the edge of picture in his grey fedora, prepared to move in for the kill.
There is the prisoner. You have anything to say in your
The first Billy Grammer knew of the slaying was the following morning when he switched on his television set.
No sooner than I turned it on and they were telling that Jack Ruby had killed Oswald, then I suddenly realized, knowing Jack Ruby the way I did, this was the man I was talking to on the phone last night. At that time, I put the voice with the face, and I knew within myself that Jack Ruby is the one that made that call to me the night before. And I think it was obvious because he knew me and I knew him, and he called me by name over the telephone. And seeing this and knowing what I knew and what he had said, then to me, it had to be Jack Ruby.
He is shot. He is shot. Oswald. It is Oswald.
While his victim lay dying on the floor of the jail office, Ruby was dragged past him and taken up to Oswald's empty cell, where he was interrogated by Don Archer.
His behavior to begin with, he was very hyper. He was sweating profusely. I could see his heart. Of course, we had stripped him down for security purposes. He asked me for one of my cigarettes, so I gave him a cigarette. Finally, after about 2 hours had elapsed, which put it around 1 p.m., the head of the Secret Service came up, and I conferred with him, and he told me that Oswald had, in effect, died, and it should shock him because it will mean the death penalty. So I returned and said, "Jack, it looks like it's going to be the electric chair for you." Instead of being shocked, He became calm. He quit sweating. His heart slowed down. I asked him if he wanted a cigarette, and he advised me he didn't smoke. And I was just astonished that this was a complete difference in behavior of what I've expected. I would say that his life had depended on him getting Oswald.
He made the statement, "We are going to kill him," which leads me to believe that this was not a spontaneous thing that happened on the spur of the moment. He was watching Oswald coming out the door, and all of a sudden he decided to shoot him. I do not believe that. I think this was a planned event with him being the man to do the shooting.
I told you earlier this morning, I think it's a waste of time. I have no chance whatsoever.
Startling new evidence of a conspiracy has emerged from a faded Polaroid photograph taken 25 years ago by Dallas housewife Mary Ann Moorman. Facing the grassy knoll, she took her picture of the president within 1/6 of a second of the fatal headshot. Horrified by the experience, Mary Ann was never to use the camera again.
Mine is a Polaroid, and I can only take one every 10 seconds, and it was at that time whenever I took it. No, I didn't. I must have sent it immediately when he slumped, because in the picture that's the way she's there, and he slumped over.
From the moment the president was hit until today, the terrible secret within Mary's picture has remained hidden.
To me, it's kind of frightening to think that this could be, and no one has found it or cared to look for it. I'm talking about our federal agencies, that something could have been there all this time and no one cared to do anything about it.
But someone has. We will reveal for the first time the man whose image has come from within this picture and who fired the shot that killed the President of the United States.
Well, I'll tell you, I love everything that's coming up in the chat here. I want to focus on, I'm going to let this run because it's going to go right into the next one and they're going to continue through. And, you know, I think it's important to show the names here who put this together. It's really a very good documentary. So we're looking at this to see what's lasted through time. What the gentleman just told you is they're going to reveal for the first time who this person is standing behind the fence on the grassy knoll. And they're really going to lean heavily on the French Connection, put it that way, with this one gentleman that is going to hunt down the French Connection with La Vide and everything that I told you in the beginning. And he assumes that this is this one hitman. I don't know for sure. This isn't the only theory on this. Here's where I'm getting foggy. This is this young girl singing now. This is the one who saw one that's singing. Let me cut that. Let me stop it so you don't miss it. Okay. So the thing that I'm saying is what I said in the beginning. If I am to believe everybody that's come forward, their deathbed confessions, their memoirs released by children after their death, the interviews done right before they passed, there's several of those. Not all of them claiming to be the hitman or whatever, but they saw something or they saw somebody behind there. What matches? You know, that's where my mind goes, where I'm trying to, just like doing Lizzie Borden, I'm trying to figure out, okay, where was the uncle again? You know, I'm trying to sort all this out. So I'm counting at this point in time, if I am to believe everybody that I've heard thus far, there was at least 4 people behind that picket fence shooting. Or at least 2 of them shooting and 4 people back there. But I'm not finding anyone that's claiming to be the shooter that saw the other shooters. You see what I'm saying? So I'm not like, yeah, I saw him. He was taking a shot too. We both just took the shot. I mean, I would so believe that. But I'm not hearing that. So either it's a much bigger fence than I'm imagining. There's some curved where one went this way and one went that way. Somebody's not telling the truth here. One of those things. I don't know how you feel about it. When you get all the information, you tell me, because you got to do your own research and you got to sort it too. So that's where I'm at with this. And that's why I called this a puff of smoke, because I think the puff of smoke changes everything. I want you to know, and then I'll start it again. This is important. I don't want you to think that the puff of smoke just came into view of the researchers and this story by the picture, because it was well in the story way before this picture was analyzed, whatever they did, whoever, I don't know what year they pulled up and they saw, okay, that she's caught the puff of smoke and this figure in the background. It's a very small little bit. If it was today, you'd say it was too pixelated to see. I'm not saying it's not there. Okay. But I want you to keep that in mind while you watch this next little piece about focusing on the picture. And then I'm going to show you a couple other witnesses who saw the puff of smoke way before this picture was ever surfaced. Okay. And I think that's important to know, because I don't want your mind to just say, oh, okay, well, the picture's really pixelated. There's probably nobody there anyway. Throw it out. You need to know the whole story there. Okay. All right. We shall continue. Anybody else know about the people stood and pointed to? Oh, yeah. They ran. Oh, yeah. And they all ran up that way. That's for sure. That's for sure. There's no question about that. Yeah. Kind of like just a blob. I think anyone would own up to shooting JFK. No limitations on murder. I know if I had done it, I would do it. Yep. But then again, there are people that seems to be plenty of people that are, are owning up to it. A lot of people were offered after the session. People kept them. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. JFK, the JFK movie. It's good. It's good. It can, if you don't go in with it, I got to tell you this, if you don't go in with a good base of understanding that more than just that went on, then you're good. If you go into it and you don't know anything about the JFK assassination, and this is your first information is the movie and the way it peels back, it's a good introduction to the fact that, yeah, the government would be involved in a coup to take out the president of the United States. We do it. We've done it all around the world, and these things have to stop. But yes, and French Connection. Oh yeah, that's a good one. But I also wanted to touch on real quick. I think it's important, and I love that you guys are putting stuff in the chat. You guys are always the best. That Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy and a Manchurian candidate. I want to state, just for the record, like, it's so important, just for here, for us, that I don't believe Lee Harvey Oswald was a Manchurian candidate. To me, a Manchurian candidate is someone that is so hypnotized, so trained, so broken, and then rebuilt back to follow commands like a hypnosis on steroids. So where I could call you up on the phone and I could say Cracker Jacks, and you'd just click, you'd go right into the mode of that person, that Manchurian candidate, go whatever, and you do whatever you had to do to fulfill whatever you'd been trained to do once you heard the word Cracker Jack. And then you can see the 2 movies they did about it. And this is something that is very deep and has been practiced for a very long time. It's not just our government, but we kind of perfected it. And you go through Harvard. It started early. There's rumors, actually more than rumors, that the Unabomber was one of them, so many others. Now, I would compare Oswald to Sirhan, who I do believe was a Manchurian candidate. I believe that he was triggered by the girl in the polka dot dress. But that's another Kennedy and another assassination. Also, another assassination didn't go down the way they say it went down. But I believe that Oswald was more of, he's just a cowboy. Ruth Payne got him the job. Ruth Payne's a whole nother story. At the book depository, I believe that she was, definitely a handler. She was definitely working with the CIA. Her file, that the Warren Commission, she was the only one they interviewed. She had 8,000 pages in her file, where other people had a page and a half. I mean, for Pete's sakes, they didn't even write down anything Oswald said. There was no notes taken of his investigation, none. And Ruth Payne had 8,000 pages. Her and her husband were very involved. So I think he was just there. He knew something was going to go down. I believe that he was told that if something goes down, you're to leave, you're to go quickly, don't talk to anybody, go to this theater and meet with such and such, and we will meet you there. Because when Oswald walked in that theater, he went and sat down next to somebody. I thought it was, I guess, who he thought he was going to meet, and then he realized he wasn't, got up and left and went sat in another part of the theater. I believe that he was just on a mission, doing what he had always done. Go here, give this folder, this envelope, do this thing, go home, don't talk to anybody till I call you again. That kind of guy. But I believe he was fully aware that something was going down. He just felt that the way he was acting when he got picked up in the theater, depending on what story you believe, what seems to be fact is that he was acting like, okay, I'm going to make a phone call and I'm going to get out of this just like all the other times. They didn't even tell him that they were, arresting him for shooting the president. He heard that he was being charged with Tippett's murder from reporters yelling in the hallway, but he's acting ever so calm through the whole thing. This is Oswald. Right up until the point where he starts realizing he's not going to get that phone call. They're not going to let him get that phone call. That's when you see him the last time he gets a little more panicked when he yells back, "I'm just a patsy." You can see him change. Same goes on with Ruby. Ruby's upset and nervous at first. He's smoking when he doesn't smoke. He's obviously acting like a man that was sent to do something. And then once he realized that Oswald was dead, he calmed down, like, now I'm good. I finished my mission, because he feared, believe me, he feared the mob and everything else more than he feared what he was going through at that point in time. And as time goes through, you can see with Ruby and how he's talking and how his feelings and body language and the things he's saying ebb and flow. And then he gets to the point that Oswald did, where he realizes he's not getting that. That help's not coming for him. They're going to kill him. And that's when he starts talking about, they're going to give me this he's talking about fast-acting cancer, which he was part of, knowing that Oswald and Ferry and people in New Orleans were working on to kill Castro. All this happened. This is not disputed. It's insane. The stuff that they would go through to try to kill other leaders of other countries and things like this. So it was basically a biolab in New Orleans that they were all involved in and working with. And Lee Harvey Oswald was part of that. I don't think he was in there banging the nurse. I think that sounds like a whole bunch of horse hockey to me. But again, it's just, it almost doesn't matter to the story, but it does. And I hate to say that, but I don't get off on that whole thing. Lee and I were in love and all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. That's kind of weird, but it could have happened. What do I know? Either way, he was in New Orleans. He was part of that, at least new ferry from going to Cuba and everything else, back and forth. All of these people are entwined. They're all entwined. So there you go. I think there's a definite difference between the two. And I think that if, the Manchurian Candidate and the Patsy part, because there were plenty of these guys walking around like that. And it's so sad to know when you're looking at it from the 40,000 foot view. I can look at some of these young men that were just, hey, I was just there. I got caught up. I was running bets for the, whatever. And the next thing you know, you're you're asked to kill your best friend and shoot him in the back of the head. You're so caught up, you know, that you almost don't realize it. You know, you're making choices and you know, but I've seen it happen to so many people. Hey, I live in Jersey. You know what I mean? So anyway, here we go. So all those little, like Nefarious, all those little yeses. All right, so she's going to sing us a little tune, and we're going to hear a little bit more about this puff of smoke.
A nightclub singer at the Colony Club believes she saw the man who killed the president. She was in Dealey Plaza on the morning of the assassination. She carried with her a brand new movie camera to film the president as he passed by. For many years, she remained unidentified, and because of her distinctive headscarf, was known simply as the Babushka Lady.
I had President Kennedy right in my zoom lens. You know, I could see Connally anytime. He's a Texan, right? Appreciate him, love him, he's great, but I wanted to see the president.
In the carnival atmosphere surrounding the motorcade, there was no indication of the danger lurking seconds away in Dealey Plaza.
When I first heard a noise, I was not aware that that was a shot being fired. And maybe perhaps that's why I continued to film, because I thought it was a backfire or a firecracker. I mean, I wasn't used to being around guns. I did not realize that those were shots until I saw in the frame of my camera President Kennedy's head come off, the back of his head. Then I realized that that was a shot. I don't know how many I heard. I know where I thought the shots came from. Was the picket fence area, in that around that large tree somewhere on the other side of those steps, but in the picket fence area. There was a figure there and there was smoke there. I will always believe that the man that shot President Kennedy was standing somewhere in the picket fence area. And no one will ever convince me any differently.
Next to Beverly, as she filmed, was eyewitness Charles Brem with his young son. He was swiftly besieged by newsmen.
Tell us exactly what you saw, sir. He was coming down the street, and my 5-year-old boy and myself were by ourselves on the grass there on Palmer Street, and I asked Joe to wave to him, and Joe waved, and I waved, and that's all right, sir. You were.
It was frightening. They took me and my 5-year-old boy because we were surrounded by the 2 busloads of people there. They had asked me, how do you know it was rifle shots? Were you ever in the Army? Were you ever? I said, yes, I was not only in the Army, I was in combat. And I pulled up my sleeve and showed them my arm and said that I've had bullet holes in me. So this started the crowd around me. Well, some of the police thought that I was possibly the guilty party, and they took me right to the front door of the school book depository where a police car was parked, and put me and little Joe in the police car. Well, an awful lot of the people who were passing by there thought that I had did it, and I was pounding on the car and calling me names that you don't repeat in good company. And there were an awful lot of you didn't know the cops from the robbers.
After the assassination, Beverly was contacted at work by FBI agents who took her undeveloped film and promised to return it within 10 days. She has not seen it since.
From the position that I was filming, I had the best shot of the assassination, and probably the only one that had a real good shot of the grassy knoll. And probably would be a lot of unanswered questions answered if my film could be found.
Fortunately, a few feet to Beverly's left, Mary Ann Moorman in the dark coat took her picture a split second after the president had been fatally struck in the head. Although frequently examined by the FBI, her historic snapshot was too widely publicized to disappear.
We know that the president's car was in the center.
Its dramatic secret, however, has only recently been uncovered. After 5 years of intensive study of the Moorman picture by 2 researchers in Texas, Jack White and Gary Mack, there is at last convincing evidence of a gunman up on the grassy knoll.
Is the guy that we call Badge Man, and it appears to me that from our study of it, his waist is right at the top of the wooden fence.
Gary Mack was the first to isolate the image, now known as Badge Man.
What I was looking at, to a lot of people, might have just
been like looking at an ink blot or something. And all of a sudden I started to see eyes and ears and forehead and hair.
Now take a
and
look
little
at
by little, the pieces of this image started to make sense to me. And that's when I first called Jack. And with his photographic work doing the blow-ups, we could see more and more and more detail. And at one point, we realized that this fellow was probably wearing a police uniform or some type of uniform that was close enough to what the Dallas police were wearing so that he could pass as a police officer. And really, to me, that was the one scary moment, because that was such a brilliant plan. A police officer in that location, away from where people were watching. If anyone did see him, they wouldn't think anything about it, because there were police in that area, although nowhere near where we see this guy. So this guy was an imposter. And I got chills then, because that was the realization that this was a very cleverly, well thought out plan.
You have to keep in mind that the Mary Moorman picture is about this size, and the area that we're dealing with is about a 1/4 inch square. So the area that Badgeman appears in is very tiny. And that's why the attempts to enhance it photographically have been very difficult over the years.
This small area was
That's
the
where
scene
I
of
would
an
have been.
extraordinary encounter. Behind the picket fence, there is a car park. And in 1963,
This is
Gordon
incredible.
Arnold was a 22-year-old serviceman, just out of training camp and en route to a posting in Alaska. This is his first film interview.
On that particular morning, what happened was I came downtown and I thought there was going to be a parade. So what I did was I parked my vehicle back here in this parking lot, and I intentionally walked to this particular corner because I wanted to take pictures of the parade off of the railroad bridge. Well, this is about as far as I got, because what happened is when I got my leg to about this position, a man came around the corner off the bridge, had a suit on, and he turned around and he told me that I wasn't going to be there. And I guess I was younger and more spunky at that time, because I told him, you and who else is going to keep me off the bridge? And he pulled out an identification card and he said, I'm with the CIA. And I said, well, that's enough muscle. I'll leave. So I turned around and I brought my leg back over like this. I walked down the fence line here, but
Listen to what that man just said. It's the little words. It's the little words out of these witnesses, out of the way they articulate certain things. He just told you that a man in a suit came off that bridge and said he was CIA. He didn't flash anything. He didn't say, like most of these people were doing, flipping out and say, ID and saying, I'm with the Secret Service. Okay. They weren't as distinguishedly dressed as they are now, where you can kind of pick them out. They're wearing a suit. They got the glasses. They got the earpiece, all that kind of stuff. This is totally different. He said he was CIA. There would be no reason. Think about this now. We're so quickly to assume that if one government agency is involved, another government agency is going to be there helping out, or whatever our minds think. There was no CIA supposed to be there. This wasn't something that they were assigned to for anything official. They weren't there to protect the president. They weren't there to be on the car to stop a bullet. That's Secret Service. And here's something else that happened in Dallas that day. There was no communication or assistance from the local police departments, from the state police. There was nobody. They were all told to stand down. Sound familiar? That there was no communication in Butler? They haven't figured out radios yet in the government? Excuse me? Think about this. So what this man just said is CIA. A guy in a suit came down and told him he wasn't going to be there. Listen to all the little words. Put them together. Put them on your shelf, because at the end of all this, all those little pieces, all those little threads are going to come together. You see what I mean? It's the little things.
about halfway. And I was looking over the fence to see if I could get a good shot of the parade. And he come back up and he told me, he says, I told you to get out of this area. And I said, okay. So I walked the complete length of the fence, got around on the other side. That's when I started to line up my frame so that I could take the picture of the parade. I had been panning shots through here so that I could
get whatever was going to come down the street. And I saw that it was the President of the United States. And as I was panning down this direction, just as I got to about this position, a shot come right past my left ear. And that meant it would have had to come from this direction. And that's when I fell down. And to me, it seemed like a second shot was at least fired over my head. There's a bunch of report going on in this particular area at that time. And what happened was that while I was laying on the ground, it seemed like a gentleman came from this particular direction. And I thought it was a police officer because he had a uniform of a police officer. But he didn't wear a hat. And he had dirty hands. But it didn't really matter much at that time because with him crying like he was and with him shaking when he had the weapon in his hand, I think I'd have gave him almost anything except the camera because that was my mother's. And literally what the man did was kick me and asked me if I was taking a picture. I told him that I was. And when I looked at the weapon, it was about that big around, and I decided I'd let him go ahead and have the film. I gave it to him, and then he went back off in this direction. I went off in this direction. And 3 days later, I was in Alaska. And I didn't come back to the United States for about 18 months.
We spent a lot of time studying the picture and looking at little details. And I guess in the back of our minds was a story that had come out 4 years earlier by a man named Gordon Arnold, who
Early
claimed to be witness to
90s,
the
I think,
assassination
and
and
Edna.
claimed to have been standing up by the fence. And there was a light blob of something very close to where Badgeman was. We weren't sure what it was, but gradually as details started coming out with Jack's photo work, we realized that this image was probably Gordon Arnold. And here's a guy who had told his story just to an acquaintance and was overheard, and that story went off to the news media, and Gordon Arnold was interviewed, and it appeared in the newspaper that he had been at the scene and was in that location, but no one believed him because there were no photographs or films that showed a man in that position. But all of a sudden, the Mormon picture confirmed his story. Yep. And again, the interesting part is that Gordon Arnold's story came out 4 years before we noticed the appearance of this figure in the Mormon photograph.
That
We
gives
later
them
learned
credibility,
that
big
Arnold
time.
was wearing this army cap that had a slight point at the top and a medallion on the right-hand side that said U.S. Army, and it's exactly what we see in the photograph. We also know that Gordon Arnold was filming this scene with a movie camera, and that's exactly what the photograph shows because we see the right arm of the person in this position with his hand up toward his face and what appears to be obstructing his face, something perhaps like a movie camera.
All right, you want to check that measurement once again?
Yeah, this is about...
Gary and Jack's work has been verified and duplicated by independent experts in Great Britain. Measurements taken in Dealey Plaza and from Mary Ann's original camera confirm that it was possible for the Badgeman figure to have fired the fatal headshot.
And excellent view of the street from here. See the center lane, which is where the president was. And see that whole lane for almost the entire period. It's a great position to be in.
But the photograph had yet more to reveal.
I was sitting in my office here one day looking at the picture, and I saw just all of a sudden what appeared to be another image standing directly behind the Badgeman. This appears to be a person in a hard hat and a white T-shirt. The lighting on him is entirely consistent with the lighting on Badgeman. In other words, there's a highlight on the construction helmet that he seemed to be wearing. There's a shadow of his head down on his shoulders, and the lighting source is absolutely consistent with the rest of the picture. He appears to be looking off in the direction of the school book depository.
It was important in all this work that we developed somehow some independent corroboration for what we were seeing. And one of the important and yet often neglected witnesses in the Kennedy case is a railroad signalman named Lee Bowers, who was working in a railroad tower behind the picket fence and behind the grassy knoll. And he had a good view of the area where we see these figures. And he testified to the Warren Commission and told them that when Kennedy appeared in Dealey Plaza, there were two men behind the fence that he could see. And these two men were in this one position the whole time before, during, and after the shooting.
Lee Bowers died in a mysterious car accident 2.5 years after the assassination. However,
Now, I wanted to stop it there because this goes in with what we were talking about in episode 1. Richard Belzer's book, Hit List, where he mentions multiple people, including Dorothy Kilgallen and her mysterious death. However insignificant other researchers seem to make that sound, she had a part in this. She had a place in it, and she died because of it, in my belief. More about that later. So now we have a count of 2 people behind the fence. Lee Bowers backs that up. And then Lee Bowers is in a single person car accident, very mysterious, on a very rural road. So many of these people, I have asked AI, I've gone through research, I've tried to add it up. The numbers vary. You'll hear everything from 50 to 500 people were killed because they had some knowledge of this assassination. And I mean, up till recently. So never underestimate what a group will do, like I said in the beginning of this, for the greater good, and just blow it off. I mean, they're celebrating at Murchison's house. We heard that in episode 2. For weeks, the maid said. There was caviar and champagne and cigar smoking and people laughing. LBJ comes out of the meeting the night before the assassination at Cliff Murchison's house. He's there with everybody from PepsiCo, Nixon, and Hoover's there. So many people. Connolly, Governor Connolly, all of these people are at a party the night before. LBJ comes out, grabs his mistress, hugs her with absolute glee, and whispers in her ear, after tomorrow, those blankety blank Kennedys, I'll never have to worry about them again. And that is not a threat. That is a promise. He said it to her that night, and he called her on the phone that morning when he talked to her at the hotel, and he said it to her again right before. And that's why I put all those pictures of him standing next to the Kennedys, standing next to Jackie Kennedy at the breakfast that morning in Dallas. And where they gave Kennedy the hat, and he wouldn't put it on to mess up his hair. He made a little joke because he wasn't going to put the Stetson hat on. And he's joking about how he always feels like he's following Jackie around on tour because nobody cares what Lyndon and he are wearing. They only care about what Jackie's wearing, joking. And Lyndon's just sitting there laughing and smiling and looking at him, and all these pictures, he's just looking at him. Yeah. You son of a gun, in an hour, you're going to be dead. And he knows it. And we got to stop letting LBJ off the hook because he knew it. I don't know that he was the only one that, I can tell you he wasn't the only one that hired somebody and said, meet us in, 1230 in Elm Street. I know there was a lot of other people there that did the same thing. It had to be. It's the only thing that makes sense. But that son of a bitch knew. And then he made her stand next to him, covered in her husband's blood, which was her idea, but not to be there. She had no reason to be there. He had no reason to even do the oath. He was automatically in. It's ceremonial at that point. And he moves from Air Force 2 to Air Force 1. He couldn't wait to be president. This son of a bitch would kill anybody that was in his way. It's all in his past. It's all in history, documented. So why anybody has a hard time imagining that LBJ was not just part of the cover-up. This freaking cover-up started weeks before the assassination even happened. Did you know that not only was Oswald working, as a cowboy for the CIA, but the FBI and the CIA, both independently from each other, this has all come out in all these files, put what you call a flash stop on his files, which means that right now this person is taken out of commission. He is not to be sent on any missions or get on a plane and go run drugs or guns or go train somebody in a foreign country. He is on a full stop. It was done 2 weeks before the assassination. Both both agencies did it, and they did it independently of each other. Because again, we know they don't communicate. They're not even communicating in Butler, PA. In Butler, PA, they all sat there and admitted on national TV that the local sheriff department wasn't talking to the local police department. The local police department wasn't talking to the Secret Service. The Secret Service wasn't talking to them, and nobody was on a damn slanted roof. That was a shot like this from the grassy knoll. And some 21-year-old with 13 phones thwarted the entire government in Butler, PA that day. Sure. It's still going on. That's why this is important. That's me. That's my opinion. I hope some of you are starting to think that way. Okay, so I want to finish out with this guy because I think this guy is a very important witness, and you'll see here at the end why. But I also, before we leave tonight, I want you to hear from Lee Bowers, because Lee Bowers gave up his life to tell the truth here, and so did several other of these people. And you're not going to see them on any of the newer stuff because they're gone. And it makes me sick to think about it. You know, really.
His story is confirmed by another eyewitness, Ed Hoffman, a deaf mute who is interviewed here for the first time.
I'd gotten off work early because I had a dentist's appointment. I was traveling down the freeway here, and I remembered that President Kennedy was coming to visit Dallas. I parked my car here. I realized at this spot that I would be able to see Kennedy pass close by. I stood here and waited, and I was looking towards where he would be coming from. I suddenly saw two men who looked suspicious directly over there in the car park.
25 years ago, these trees did not obscure the view. From his position at the side of the freeway, Ed Hoffman could clearly see the car park area behind the grassy knoll.
I saw a man standing here, wearing a black hat and a blue jacket. I saw a puff of smoke, and I thought it was a cigarette, but it wasn't. He had a gun, and he walked towards the railroad. He tossed the gun to the second man. Then he turned and straightened his jacket, adjusted his hat, and walked casually away. The man with the striped shirt, the railroad shirt, walked over to the electrical box with the gun. He took the gun apart. He put it in a toolbox. He then walked slowly away in the direction of the railroad track. When the motorcade passed by below me here, I realized that Kennedy had been shot. I was horrified. I saw a policeman standing on the railroad bridge, and I tried to get his attention, but he didn't see me. So I got in my car and drove to the area where I had seen the two men. But there were so many people there, and I couldn't find them. I went to the FBI to tell them what I had seen. They didn't want me to say anything. They offered me money to keep quiet. They didn't understand that it was more important for me to tell them what I'd seen. It was hard for me to communicate with them. I do feel that the two men I saw were working together, and that the one with the gun behind the fence was the man who shot President Kennedy.
Look at the situation. The FBI started in the investigation right away, and they had all these reports, over 50 reports from eyewitnesses saying at least one of the shots came from that area. And here, all of a sudden, they've got a photograph that shows a precise area within a sixth of a second of when the president's head explodes. Someone, somewhere in the FBI must have wondered, perhaps the gunman is in this picture. And I think they knew the evening of the assassination that there was a second gunman up on the grassy knoll.
Quick observation. You may not think it's important. I don't know how it fits, but I'm sitting here listening to these guys, and I love this team. They're going after the picture and stuff, and they're father and son maybe. But either way, I love it. I love that people are in there and they're researching and they're doing their thing. And this other guy, the guy that got sent, it was a young Navy guy at the time. What, was 21? He said, and then he went to Alaska. All right, listen to what he said. Listen to what they're saying. Look at what you're looking at. What did they say about this guy? That he was in probably a police uniform, but wasn't what? Wearing a hat. All three of them said it. We're looking at the picture. They described it as he wasn't wearing a hat. This man, who I also believe, the deaf mute, God bless him. I think they killed him too. I hope not. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I saw him on the list. They're ruthless bastards. And, we have to, that's why this is so important. You have to tell your kid, it can't happen again. We have to get in front of this train, right? So this guy's not wearing a hat. They all said it. So who's the guy in the hat that hands the gun off to the other guy? They did say that there was some construction guy, maybe a guy wearing a construction hard hat standing next to this dude, right? And the deaf mute guy says that he sees them and the breakdown of the weapon and all that and what they were wearing. He said he was wearing a black coat and a black hat. So how many people do we have behind the fence now? You see where I'm coming from? And I don't disbelieve either. I know that witnesses can be wrong and you can fill in blanks and you do all that. That's why, again, I'm going back to closer to when it actually happened rather than 60 years later. But I believe that something like this, you're going to remember. I mean, we go through the same stuff when we're trying to tell our ghost experience. People don't believe that I saw what I saw when I was young, but I saw what I saw. But you can be wrong too. He could have just been mistaken and remembers a hat. The other guy doesn't remember the hat. But we're looking at the picture and they're saying they didn't see a hat and they're seeing a police uniform. Taken at face value, we got us a problem, Lucy. You know what I mean? Or we have 4 people behind the fence. Before this whole series is over, I'm going to bring in about 4 more. And you're going to have to decide who's telling you the truth, but just mistaken about a few details, and how does it matter in the whole scenario? Because right now, we're way past conspiracy. Right now, we're way past any cover-up. We know this thing was getting covered up 2 weeks before. But we're trying to sort out who was who and what was what and who was behind that. That's what we're trying to do. Okay, a little bit more.
The medical evidence as it exists now does not indicate a shot from the front. But we do have to understand that if Badgeman was firing, and if it was Badgeman's shot that struck the president in the head, that means the medical evidence has been altered. And there you've got conspiracy existing within the United States government.
Despite the government, Gordon Arnold is certain of what he saw.
The training that I just finished, they were shooting live ammunition over us. And when a bullet goes past your ear and your eardrum feels like it's coming out the other side of your head, it's close. That's why I thought I was shot. There's no doubt in my mind that I was there. And it did occur.
Further verification of Gordon's presence on the knoll comes from a surprising source, Senator Yarborough.
During that shooting, my eye was attracted to the right. I saw a movement, and I saw a man just jump about 10 feet like at the old-time flying tackle in football and land against the wall. I thought to myself, there's an infantryman who's either been shot at in combat or he's been trained thoroughly. The minute you hear firing, get under cover.
This colorized version of the Badgeman picture was shown to Gordon Arnold for the first time. He has always believed there was no proof of his presence on the knoll that day.
It looks like a soldier in summer uniform with an overseas cap on. It looks like it would have been my
my uniform. It looks like there's a camera, or there's something up in front of the face. It looks like a white spot. If it's a flash, it would be like off of a muzzle flash. This looks like a police officer because that would be the badge. That would be the arm emblem. Would this fella back here be the railroad man I asked you about this morning? Because when I was walking to the site, and I had never told anybody that I had, when we were out there filming, it reminded me that there was a railroad worker just standing out there by the railroad tracks. But it looks like somebody's taking a picture. Yeah, I couldn't figure out why would I be standing crooked until I flipped that up, and if that's a muzzle blast or flash, then whoever's standing there would have been a fool to stand up straight. He'd been trying to get away from harm's way is what it boils down to. And that could very well be me. Son of a gun. That would be the closest thing that I've ever. To be honest with you, the picture bothers me because if this is a true thing of what has occurred, then I could be the only one that soccer man. They killed the president. And to be honest with you, if I'd have known this, I wouldn't have given the interview. He said it's too close to home right now.
If the figure is real, then that means the witnesses were correct, and the researchers who have spoken of conspiracy for 25 years now were also correct. It means the Warren Commission was wrong. There was a conspiracy. The question then is, who was involved in the conspiracy? And alongside with that is, was Lee Harvey Oswald involved in the conspiracy? One of the good things the Warren Commission did was literally itemize the last few days of Lee Harvey Oswald's life. And the problem for the Warren Commission now would become, well, he had no opportunity to be with other people to plan something like this. So we now have to wonder seriously, perhaps for the first time, whether Lee Harvey Oswald even fired any shots.
I would venture to answer that question with a big old nope. I don't think he did. And I'll tell you something else I uncovered. I have an answer for you on the Tippit shooting. I'm right there with you, Lisa, what you stated earlier. There's a little more to it. And I think we'll bring that up probably in episode 4 or 5-ish, because that one has its own, it's so bombastic. Just getting through the puff of smoke it is rough, because what this puff of smoke does, I know, poor guy. I mean, the way the whole thing is so believable. And you can also through him see what an emotional time it was, what, this young kid was feeling. He's gone off in the Navy, and, he's come back, and he's now revisiting, and he says, yeah, I'll give an interview. And then he sees this. And then he realizes, gosh, I was 10, 15 feet from this guy, the guy who shot the president. Nobody ever believed me that I was here, and that kind of thing. He took a lot of ribbon through his life, about it. it's a lot of emotions all coming up at once, but there's also that reverence of, you know, of realizing how close you came and having all that come home in one moment. You know, it makes this whole thing so believable. Here's another one. And like I said, because of paranormal cases and, you know, true crime cases, which this is, and mysteries and things that we always try to break apart and sort out, you're always looking at the person's body language, and you're always trying to figure out, okay, what's in it for them? Are they selling a book? Are they making up something to, you know, push a movie or whatever it may be? These people are risking their lives to come out, especially the ones in the old black and white, because just like this young man here with the deaf mute, this young man with the picture, of course, coming after the fact. So it's not as much just like Beverly, who came out and told you. She waited a long time. This man was taken out, and I wanted to share that one with you. So let me reach out and grab that. We're going to finish this one up on the Men Who Killed Kennedy. We're trying to follow it along. We'll eventually see the whole thing, but we're going to finish that a little bit more on that one later on. There's more behind it. It's going to be more about the guy I told you that spent a lot of time searching out the French connection, literally. And he is of the mind that the guy in the picture who looks like he's wearing the police uniform is one of these French hitmen that came over. And one of his MOs was to wear costumes like a police uniform. And they asked him, had he ever worn a police uniform in any of his hits? And they said, yes, that was one of his favorites because it always fits in. So does that solidify that this was this guy? I don't know. What doesn't work for me in that whole scenario and how he got the information, it isn't the guy, it's the guy he got it from. And the guy he got it from was in prison and wrote down everything in this sealed letter, and he was like trying to get out and all this other stuff. They had asked him to do the hit and he turned it down, and it went to the next person. So again, how long were they planning this? Was this, you know, was he talking to whoever contacted this guy, this French guy in prison, and asked him if he wanted to do the hit? Was it the hit for Dallas? Was it the hit for Chicago? Because we know that one was thwarted. Okay. We know 2 hitmen were found in Chicago. They left their weapons behind. So was it that one? Was it the one in Miami? Because that was just two weeks before this. So I'm not really sure what that information tells me, other than the fact that this could be a French hitman who liked to wear police uniforms, part of his MO, but I'm still left with the questions of how many freaking people were behind this fence? You see what I mean? Because they all can't be right, or there'd be like 30 people lined up there, everybody with a rifle, all aiming at the president. I do believe there was multiple groups. I've said that before, all over the place, but crossfire. You crossfire. Anybody who's ever shot a weapon or been a part of a military operation or been a sniper or any of these can tell you crossfire. You want to make sure you get the shot. You put them in crossfire. They can't go back. They couldn't go forward. Can't go sideways. You got them. And this was a hit that had to be done. It had to be finished that day. It was high priority. Whoever put the pressure on this, they had serious power. And that's when you start backing up and going, who had the power, who benefited from it, who could pull it off. And every time I do that, I bump right into LBJ. I bump right into the CIA. I bump right into, you see where I'm coming from? But multiple directions. Crossfire. So let's hear from this guy, and then we'll get out of here for tonight. If you guys have any questions, throw them up. Any ideas or theories at this point? But I want you to hear from him. I think this is him. This is Sam.
On November 22nd, where were you?
November the 22nd, I was standing on top of the triple underpass. waiting for the parade and the president's car. I arrived about
That's Mark Lane.
11:45 or close to noon. Two policemen was talking to me and asked me, one of them asked me if I would come back up there and identify the people that had any business or had a right to be up there.
They would be the railroad employees.
They'd be railroad employees, and I told him I would.
And what was your position with the railroad company?
Track and signal supervisor for the Union Terminal Railroad. I've put in 41 years of railroad service in the signal department.
Did you look in any particular direction when you heard the shots?
Yes, I looked over to where I thought the shot came from, and I saw a puff of smoke still lingering underneath the trees in front of the wooden fence. The report sounded like it came from behind the wooden fence. And a policeman towed his motorcycle down in the middle of the street and run up the embankment with his pistol drawn. He was running toward that particular spot. And also another motorcycle policeman right behind him tried to ride up the embankment on his motorcycle, and it turned over about halfway up the embankment. And he got off his motorcycle and left it laying there and run on over to the fence with his gun in his hand.
Where do you think the shots came from?
Well, I know where that third shot came from.
Where did that shot come from?
Behind the picket fence.
Is there any
close to the little plaza?
Is there any doubt in your mind that that shot came from behind the fence?
There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt whatsoever in my mind in the statement that I made to, and the sheriff.
It's incredible to me, all of these different people who saw someone behind the fence or saw the puff of smoke from the grassy knoll. You can watch the Zapruder film, and again, there's lots of controversy about that. There's frames missing, there's edits, there's this, there's that, frames are repeated. Regardless, you can still see things in it. And everybody's running up the knoll, which, again, I think is commendable, because you're in this moment of someone just shot my president, and you're I don't know how to describe it. It's like your common sense is overridden by this sense of the audacity and get this guy kind of, it's just this heroics kicks in, this adrenaline. I'm sure there's a psychological term for it, but it's just the only other time I haven't seen it that often. But I saw it in Butler, PA, when everybody ran toward the stage and didn't run away. So there's something that happens to a crowd like that. I would imagine it probably happens maybe at a rock concert where something happens to the singer or the band or something along those lines, where you're just so caught up in who you're there for that it overrides your own sense of survival. These people are running towards the shooting. Okay. There's no doubt that somebody was there behind the fence. And this puff of smoke, the pictures, the witnesses, all of it coming together, standing alone with the evidence of the actual headshot and what people saw there, also on film and on in photos and in witness statements. The .42, the back of the head, coming from the front. There was a bullet hole in the windshield. There was another shot, probably not from the grassy knoll, probably from more in front of the limousine. That's something else we're going to bring up. I heard this one first from Jim Mars, and he talked more about what happened to the vehicle afterwards, how fast they cleaned it up. There was Secret Service there, people there telling the nurses to go get buckets of water to clean up this car. They cleaned up that car faster than they cleaned up the roof in Butler, PA. This is a pattern, and it's still happening. Notice to see it. And I hope you don't see it again, but if you see it coming next time, maybe this time we can stop it, because this is ridiculous. So the puff of smoke, whether it was seen with human eyes or through film or witness statements on documents, which none of those showed up in the Warren report, I assure you. In fact, if someone did give a witness statement that wound up in the Warren report years later, decades later, in some cases, they saw what they wrote and it wasn't even what they said. They just changed it to fit. Someone else who changed it to fit was Gerald Ford. And I will bring up several researchers next weekend who back me on this. And he admitted it many times in public that, well, many, 3 that I know of, probably more if I know 3. So Gerald Ford, who was on the Warren Commission, placed there. Everybody on the Warren Commission was there for a reason, I assure you. And Alan Dulles was heading it. I don't care if they call it the Warren report. That was the Dulles report. And Gerald Ford took the autopsy picture to add into the Warren report and changed the wound on the back of the neck, on the back, and moved it over to up underneath the back of the neck. And his quote of why he did it was, he said, for clarity. For clarity. He was then, not long after that, he wound up becoming president, did he not? Put him right under Nixon. They knew they were going to get rid of Nixon. Here you go, Gerald. Think about it. It's a theory. Can't prove it. But that happened. So that's just another aspect of all this. So if you have the puff of smoke, you have the autopsy photos that we settled in the last episode were absolutely jacked up. That we know that the body was switched. The body was changed. There was 2 different coffins. We'll have people talking about that. Hey, when we put him in there, we had him in this, and they had to take the handles off the coffin to get it in to the, I think it was into one of the ambulance or something. They tried to put it in, or it was one of the cargo planes, something. They had to take the handles off to get it through the door. They know what coffin they put him in. It was a heavy, heavy casket. It was a bronze, shiny casket with lighter bronze handles. It had, certain satin lining, all of this. Well, when it showed up in Bethesda, it was just an old metal box. And his brain's missing. Doesn't take an awful lot to figure out there's some chicanery going on there. But why? And who would have done it? Who was there? Who could have done it? Well, there's a little mystery about a man who got a phone call and told his wife and kids at dinner, hey, honey, I got to go. I had one of those calls. I don't know when I'll be back. I'll probably be gone all weekend. It's going to be a long job. Don't do this. Don't do that. Real nervous. And then he left. And that man was one of the best makeup artists, coroners that there were. Somebody was picked up, put on a plane, and had 3 to 4 hours to fix that headshot to make it match what they needed it to say. There were so many people involved in this, guys. So many. And I laughed throughout the decades that I knew so much of this. And now with the files coming out and, people going, it's a nothing burger. Don't pay any attention to it. Watch those people. Watch those people that come out and tell you, oh, it was this document proves this person did it. Watch those people jumping to conclusions, taking one piece of paper out of 80,000 plus files now. And those are files, and each file has multiple papers in it, multiple documents. It takes a while to go over them. So listen to the people who are going, we're going over it. We're looking through it. We're talking amongst ourselves. We're trying to sort what might be important, what might not be. A lot of really good researchers that have been out there for decades are going, hey, this right here, we have confirmation on this. We have confirmation on this. There's several very powerful documents that came out in these files, and they're still being dropped. And now they're dropping the RFK files got dropped. Sirhan. We know that's crazy story. And the MLK as well. And I honestly think the MLK is going to be a little bit more mucked around because the FBI was trying to get him to basically off himself, take himself out of the picture. So a lot of the evidence coming against MLK, you have to sort. Was it real? Was it, Memorex? So that one's going to take a while. But this one, this is the man, the mother of all mothers right here. And if anybody ever tells you that a conspiracy could not be pulled off because nobody could keep a secret, not that many people could keep a secret. Well, they can if they're compartmentalized, and they can if you keep killing them off. So yeah, it's very possible because we're looking at it. And we almost looked at it again last, April? When was it? It seems like last week and a year ago in Butler, PA. Because I can tell you that was the only rally that CNN was ever going to play live. And they sent their best photographer and told him to use fast film. We want to make sure you catch all of this. Well, who knew there? They knew ahead of time too. And I bet when we start digging and backing up, we're going to back right up into a scenario very similar to this, where it started getting set up weeks before. This is terrible, what happened here. Whatever you feel about Kennedy or his shenanigans, or you think he's a hero because of PT 109, or a hero because he didn't want to do Operation Northwoods, or was getting lied to by the CIA and messed up the whole Bay of Pigs thing. Human beings are humans. And they're going to do some things in politics you like and you don't like. Are you hearing the whole story? Are you getting the whole picture? I'm hearing people now yelling and screaming about politics. And I'm thinking, do you think that these people might have a little more information than you do? Have you ever seen a military operation? Have you ever seen an investigation? Why are you losing your mind now? This has got to be tighter than a crab's ass. Everything that's going on now, give it time. Give it time. Keep your eye on it. But let it breathe, because we don't want any mess ups or any loopholes or any technicalities going on. This time we want justice, and we want justice for this one too. It doesn't matter as much that all these people got away with it. A lot of them didn't. You'll see people peeling off for decades. Will the truly evil get theirs? Well, maybe not in this life. We all know as light workers are going to have to suffer through it. The pain they caused for every individual that cried that day, for everybody that lost family members that were attached to it, they got a long journey ahead of them. But what we can do is learn from it, so we can recognize it the next time it comes around. Because, baby, it ain't going nowhere. It's just got meaner and uglier and dug in deeper. And the only thing that kills something like that is sunlight and accountability. And I'm here for all of it. How about you? I love y'all. Thanks for hanging with me. I will see you tomorrow night for The Lost Boys. Think about this puff of smoke. It's not just a puff of smoke. It's evidence. It's evidence. Each one of these things that we've talked about so far in these 3 episodes has been evidence of a coup, evidence of a conspiracy. This is actually where the term conspiracy theorist started and had a negative connotation added to it. It all happened with Mark Lane, the gentleman you saw with the glasses asking this last gentleman what he saw. That's Mark Lane. He wrote a book. Once he wrote that book, they made up a little term and sent it out there in circulation. Oh, conspiracy theorists. Crazy tinfoil hat wearing. Crazy people. Y'all talking crazy. That could never happen. Well, in my lifetime, that tinfoil hat turned into a tinfoil crown, and I wear it very proudly upon my head. I hope you do too. I wish it wasn't true, but if it is, we're going to keep it out there. Tell the youngins about this. Hopefully, by the time they're our age, this will just be a nasty piece of history that hasn't repeated itself. We can only hope and pray for that. I love you all. Let's watch a little something on the way out. I think I got something. See you tomorrow night, 8:30. Lost Boys. Get your faux vampire teeth. Get your cape. And I'll see you tomorrow night on Rumble. Good night, everybody.